Welcome to Selling a Business, Paths to Success. This session is presented by Fifth Third and Bass Berry. Let's meet the panelists. First, Rob Schipper, Group Head, Fifth Third Investment Bank. Next, Chris Chandler, CFO, Radio Systems Corp. Meet Grant Jackson, Co-founder and General Managing Partner, Council Capital. Welcome, Grace Murphy, Founder and CEO, Advanced Care Partners. And your moderator today is Tatiana Paterno, member Bass, Berry & Sims. Tatiana, the virtual stage is yours.
All righty. Well, thank you very much. I am so excited about this panel. I mean, we have a wealth of M&A expertise here represented on this panel, and I think our audience will walk away with really valuable insights. We have Chris, who has been doing deals since 2004 when he joined Radio Systems. Rob, who has been in investment banking since 1993, so almost 30 years. And Grant has been a private equity investor for 20 years. And Gracie, of course, she has very recent experience, but very valuable to share with our audience. So without further ado, let's get started. And in this first part of our discussion, I'd like to focus generally on how to prepare for a sale and ways to maximize value. And my first question is for Chris. Chris, Radio Systems was acquired by the private equity firm Clayton, Dubilier & Rice in May of last year. And I understand that this was not your first sale process. So would you please tell us about the other processes and what you learned from them and how you use that to maximize value when you sold to CDR?
Absolutely. First of all, Radio Systems was our main owner had started the company back in 1991, and he was a very patient seller. So we've been approached all through the years, and we really didn't start getting serious till around 2016. But when we did go out, he made it known to the potential buyers. He set a price, and he wasn't going to move off of it. And we got within less than 5% of price. And I guess the other side thought he was going to cave, and so he walked away. We went through that same process in 2018, and once again he was saying, "I'll sell it if it's at the right price." And we got to the last minute, and they tried to change the price, and so we walked away. But some of the key things we learned during that process, we really didn't realize how much they would put the value on patents that were expiring. We had one patent that had a lot of secret sauce behind it, and so we weren't too concerned because of the secret sauce we knew about. But we realized in both of those first two processes that is one reason that the potential buyers discounted the price. The other area that we also looked at was we had one category that wasn't performing as well, and we just didn't pay as much attention to that category, and we didn't have the story behind it. And they also discounted for that category. So we took those two learnings when we did go back to the market in the end of 2019, first of 2020, and we created a white paper for the patents, and we also created a plan for the one category that was not performing as well.
Mm-hmm. That is, so you basically anticipated questions that were going to come from the buyers. And did you guys end up getting the value you wanted?
Yes, we did, and this was also during a COVID period. We started with the over 65 interested parties at the end of 2019, first of 2020. We whittled it down to 12 that we actually took visits from in February of 2020. Then we were getting ready. We did whittle it down to 3, and that was the first week of March. And then, as everybody knows, COVID hit on March 15th, and one of the potential buyers exited at that time as the capital markets froze up. The other two buyers continued, and we continued down that path. And we actually got to the deal with CD&R. We were one of the first deals after COVID that was actually able to get through the markets.
Wow, that's a great story. Good for you guys. Now, Gracie, I'd love to go to you now. You've partnered with Grant's firm, Council Capital, in November of 2018, so 2.5 years ago. And you have a very interesting story to tell about how that deal came about, and it's very different from Chris's story.
Definitely the opposite. We did not have a process, neither we were for sale. Almost put it ourselves for sale by accident by doing a interview for a reporter, and she published our article as ACP is now for sale. And we started to get bombarded by private equities throughout the entire nation. And my mom always used to tell me, your best teacher is your last mistake. So might as well just learn from it. So I embedded myself into studying what even selling a company looks like. From month number 2, we have been profitable. And so we didn't need capital. So for us to even consider someone to come on board and help us to grow this company, that partner had to be very aligned with the mission and the culture of really growing something bigger and better versus just prioritizing, the bottom line. And through the discovery of what a sale looks like, I interviewed probably with 12 private equity groups, and the ones that were very focused on the profits and the bottom line are very clear since the beginning. So I learned how to exit from those conversations pretty rapidly. And when I found Council, I knew that because I had gone through my own process of investigating what I wanted or didn't want to have as a partner, I was able to do the assessments a little bit better on what the ideal partner would be.
That's a very different process and an interesting one too. And and we talked a little bit about sort of anticipating questions and creating value. I was really impressed with your approach of creating value, and not so much focused on what the purchase price is going to be when I exit, right? But much more on kind of creating the overall value for your employees, your patients, and your community. So that was that's really cool, and that sort of resulted in, I think, a great outcome overall.
Yeah, being in a company that you're a service company that really focus on caring for quality and clinical outcomes. If you don't put your people first and don't care for them and develop them first, there is no value after all. Yeah.
But thank you. Now, Rob, I'd love to hear from you now. You've been in investment banking for 30 years, like I said, and you lead a team of 100 bankers at Fifth Third. What steps have you seen your clients take to prepare for a sale? And can you provide examples of value creation prior to a sale that you've seen?
Absolutely. And one, I need to audit that little time. I don't feel that old. But some of those lessons I was listening to Chris and Gracie, a lot of what they went through is some of that same themes that some of our best business owners go through. And while something might start accidental, Gracie, in terms of your process, you really flipped it into something much more strategic. So that theme around what I'll call planning and education. So the one key takeaway is it's never too early to start planning. And most business owners, there's two elements, right? They have the family, so the family wealth, and then the business, right? So it's advanced planning on both of those elements, and I call it putting together that playbook. So if you think about a successful sports team, they don't just show up and on the field and expect to win, right? There's a lot of preparation, starting with recruiting to summer camp to a lot of practice and analyzing film. Same with a business exit, right? Of on the wealth side, assessing what the objectives are, how to best structure it to protect the wealth or the tax leakage, as well as, what's life going to be after the sale, right? And in order to can I still maintain the lifestyle where I don't have business income, where I have a different stream. Same on the business side, right? I think it's really imperative to start thinking about this 2 to 3 years ahead of an exit, if not earlier, and putting together what I'll call that business playbook. And that can be different for different companies, but it's similar elements. And Chris, listening to you, it's thinking about how are investors going to look at my company? And are there areas where I need to deepen, like a management team? Do I have the right team in place? My how I'm positioned, right? In order to drive value, it's about the growth and the addressable market that a company is after. Are there things that I need to change as a business owner to be able to attack that? And then there's a lot of diligence items such as financials and getting those in place. But so there's a lot of elements that go into that playbook that a business owner can pull out and think about it each year in terms of how am I progressing towards those goals. And the other key theme about education is really, I call it the creating the right network. And there's a formal network and an informal network. The informal is, talk to your peers in your industry, or if you're a member of YPO of owners that have gone through a similar process. What were the pitfalls and what did they think about and learn from that over time? That's great knowledge. And then the formal network is just relying on you need a lot of smart folks around you to help a business owner think about an exit, whether it's a lawyer, an accountant, in certain situations, an investment banker, but rely on those experts because it's going to be really important.
Thank you, Rob. Yeah, you one of the things that you mentioned is how are the investors going to look at your company? That's one of the key questions. And I'd love to hear Grant's perspective on that. Grant, as a private equity investor, what criteria do you think about when you're investing? What's important to you, and where do you see value? And what makes you want to pay a higher price for a particular business? So tell us about that.
Thank you, Tatjana. Just for context, Counsel is a lower middle market healthcare private equity fund focused on investing in companies that improve the healthcare system, what we call the right side of change in healthcare. They could be companies like Gracie's, which is a direct care provider, or they could be supportive to the healthcare delivery system, whether that be a technology-enabled services business or a technology company. So the first thing we look for, and Gracie mentioned this, is that we're trying to figure out, are these companies actually making healthcare better? And the elements that we use to evaluate that is, the very first thing we look at is if it's a company providing care directly to patients, like Gracie's company ACP does by taking care of medically fragile children, then are they providing world-class care, and do they provide it consistently across their population? The second component, which is very tied to that, is do they have strong compliance? You have to be able to do things in a compliant way if you're in the healthcare industry. And then if it's a technology-enabled services company or a technology company, then same kinds of questions, just applying it a little differently. So they must have a great solution and have a real need for making healthcare better. Once all of that is in place, we obviously do care about the financial component, but we found that a prerequisite for building a sustainable, great business is to have great care. But then if you've built a company around great care and great compliance, then you probably are going to have a company with a strong unit economic model that can scale. And so we're looking for that as a third but necessary component of the kind of companies that we're interested in investing in. So the kinds of businesses that if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to figure out how do I ensure that my business becomes more valuable, have people pay more for it, the first components are just to address that. Make sure you really address a real need and you're taking great care of your customers. like Gracie and ACP does. And then once you've done that, then there are a variety of things, and you would find some of these things out through the kind of networking that Rob just alluded to, in terms of really building your relationships around people who have built valuable companies before. But a few ingredients that we look for, the first component is just having a team where you are really aligned together on where we're going from here. You know, it is a real marriage. You have to feel like you're going to get along, be aligned strategically, and together, if you are aligned, then whatever changes ultimately have to be made, whether it be adding in additional team members, et cetera, you can do that, but you have to have that alignment to begin with. So it's quality of the team. The single biggest thing that kills deals is trust, a lack of trust. And so the key thing is really ensuring that you have that trust up front, and then through that, as you build your business, ensure that you build scalability into the business. I think from our standpoint, profitability is somewhat oversold. What we really care about is ensuring that a business has the people in place, the infrastructure, which means making sure you've got a variety of systems that don't have to be ripped out day one, that you've got enough of a bench that you can start growing. Because the way we're looking at the business is not where are you today, but based on where you are today, is it going to get us where we need to get? Mm-hmm. And those kinds of things, having those kinds of things in place, recognizing where you still need to build and just being honest about that, that collectively will help you demonstrate to a private equity buyer or any other kind of buyer that you're more valuable.
Thank you, Grant. This is very interesting. Just be sure that, well, clearly have the foundation that your business is needed, that you're addressing a need and you're addressing it the right way and with the right team, and that you can scale it. That's great. Now, we've been talking about sort of preparing for the process, but one question I wanted to ask everybody, maybe who can comment on this. I mean, sometimes we hear questions from our clients about, well, do I have to have a banker, or can I just go to kind of do it on my own and talk to a few private equity firms and see what happens? Anybody wants to comment on that?
I'll say that Rob and I probably have different views. Yeah, maybe not entirely, actually. So, Rob, why don't you go ahead and?
Yeah, I think that's the case. Earlier stage companies, I don't think you necessarily need an investment banker, but you do need advisors, right? So whether that's a lawyer or that accountant, somebody that's seen that transaction and can really give you good advice to get it to close. So there's a lot of complexity, and frankly, the other side, there's a lot of emotion too, right, in deals, and the buyer, wants that process in place too. I think there's so much, Grant, so much transparency in the market today in terms of buyers and sellers that price, obviously in competitive processes, price does go up, but I think most processes are competitive. But as a general rule, Tatiana, and this is just a guideline, is deals that are kind of under 20 million in enterprise value, either have a business broker or a lawyer or accountant kind of helping them. I think once you get into north of 20, especially towards 30 to 50 and above, you tend to have investment bankers involved in a process.
And I'd say we're probably more in sync than I would have imagined. The yardstick we tend to think about is, if you're going to sell 100% of your business, fully exit and get out, then if you're not really looking for a relationship with the buyer post-deal, then that's a very clear indication to use a broker, bank, or some form of agent that is going to represent you through a sale. with most of our deals, the entrepreneurs are choosing to roll somewhere between 30 and 40% of their equity, which means they are significant owners going forward. And I think what Rob said is absolutely accurate. As long as we as a private equity fund know that there are even 2 other buyers in the mix, entrepreneurs today know what their companies are worth. There's never been a time where there is more transparency around what the price of a company or value of a company is. Mm-hmm. So having a modest amount of economic tension is enough to ensure that you get the right price. What we've always encouraged people to do, no matter what size their business is have a really strong advisor of some kind, whether that's an attorney, an accountant, somebody who can help navigate you through the process. Because it's a lot more than just about price. A lot of other terms you're going to be working through, et cetera. And so having somebody who's knowledgeable about the market is really critical to helping you to get through a process where you're going through it the first time, where your advisor isn't.
And if I may, through my experience, even if you don't have a banker to help you, really coming up with the right questions and criteria of what the partnership would look like and what you're looking for in the new partnership. And you get a trust to feel that you have going through due diligence, because, going back to this is a marriage. If you're dating during due diligence, and it's really hard to go and very distracting as well, but really making sure that future partner has also your best interest in heart, that is not one person against the other. If we're going to be partners in the future, you have to feel that collaboration early on versus later on.
Yeah, we used a investment banker in all 3 of our processes, and just the amount of work that was required to get the book put together, and the detail going down to, we've got over 4,000 SKUs, and the history of going back on 10 years on the SKUs, because the different buyers wanted to see the different trends. And so they had a team of analysts that could put all these numbers together, and we just didn't have the team, and we were a pretty large organization. So we couldn't have done it without them. And plus, they're in the game every day, so they know what, some of the questions that are being asked and some of the hot buttons. So we felt it was worth it every time. And they can also, they can sometimes be the guy in the middle that can push the number a little bit. And like you said, as long as there's 2 or 3 horses there, if you decide you want to win this race, and they often do a good job of playing one off against the other.
Mm-hmm. Those are great perspectives. Thank you, guys. Now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the sale process itself, kind of what to expect, the mechanics, and we can cover this pretty quickly. Maybe Rob, you could get us started to talk about sort of the different kinds of buyers and different kinds of processes and advantages and disadvantages of each.
Sure. And we could spend all day on this, but the good news is that in today's market, there's never been more choices for entrepreneurs than, as Grant said, either want to recap and continue to grow their business or outright sell. I think that's good news. I think the bad news is there's so many choices, right? How do you synthesize it down to the right ones? But in bookends, if you think about it, or simplifying it, you've got private equity on one side, and then strategics buyers on the other, and in between you've got family offices that's kind of quasi private equity, and then the emergence of SPACs is certainly something that's topical today. I'd put them closer to really an exit alternative towards being public versus straight away M&A, but it is an M&A transaction. Put them on the side of strategics. But in private equity, I think it's the decade of private equity, Grant. So you're in a good field. What I mean by that, there's just so much capital coming into the market and really funding, a lot of growth, funding new companies and creating opportunities. In 2006, there were roughly 4,000 private equity firms. Today, there's over 8,000. And when I think about the criteria between those, so you think about the depth of the market, there's a lot of sponsors. So finding the ones that align, and listening to Grant, your focus, right, is, and we're seeing that more and more. It's not just I have capital. It's really I understand your business. I know how to make your business grow faster and be more successful, and I'm going to be aligned with you. So we're seeing that segmentation of the private equity, both from size as well as sector. When you think about management continuity of do I need to stay along? Private equity wants management to stay. Strategics, I think it could go either way, but there's typically a shorter transition period. Grant mentioned rollover equity. So on a private equity deal, typically an owner's rolling 20 to 40% of the deal. Where in a strategic, it's mostly cash with the potential for an earnout. Valuation, I'd say it's a push in today's market. If you've got an attractive company, historically, I'd say strategic should be able to pay more because there's synergies, but we're seeing private equity with the scarcity of good companies. They're stretching on the first deal, and they're through operations as well as add-on acquisitions, blending that multiple down. But valuations is a push. Deal structure. There's a lot more flexibility in a private equity deal, really aligning with the owner's objectives versus a strategic. Leverage is higher, tends to be higher, not always, but on a sponsor deal. And then diligence. I'd give the nod to strategics because they tend to understand the businesses better. So the risk coming into that diligence period is lower. So Tatiana, summing it up is there's a lot of great options today. You really need to, back to that planning, an owner needs to understand what their objectives are, right? And align those with the right type of buyer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Robin. We've talked about that. We've talked about kind of specific processes. Chris talked about his was that starting with 65 interested party and whittling it down to 12, and then to 2, and then to 1. And Gracie talking about kind of a sudden influx of interest, and kind of trying to deal with that. So Chris, you guys were you kind of knew what you were doing, what you were getting into, and Gracie, I think you mentioned that you did it sort of on your own for a while, right? Without any help from any advisors. Looking back at it, how do you feel about that?
I definitely think that the way I did, I would have done differently because the time and the distraction that caused in the business on the operation side, since I was the main leader of the business, is very disturbing. To go through the idea of selling, and if you engage with an LOI and start the due diligence, and you don't engage the right people in the right time, you ended up taking care of most of everything. But one thing that I learned is that I will never do different is I was very transparent with my team since day one. And selling a company to me was never about me. It was about giving and creating more opportunities to them to grow as well. So, engaging into and going into the due diligence, you will need your team to be aware and to be collaborative with you. But I would have definitely engaged my CPA as well as my legal advisor early on, so I could have spent more time working with them and growing the business as we go through the due diligence. But I am now in charge of the inorganic growth of ACP. Having gone through what I did doing due diligence and LOI and negotiations really created a solid foundation for me to know what I'm doing today, because I had to go through it myself. And it was such a incredible experience because Consol Capital are very, very honest people, that one of the first questions I had to them was, how many times or how often do you change the deal in the middle of the due diligence? And it was something that it was uncomfortable for me. And their answer was almost never, if if the company is at the situation that you're describing to us, that we're not finding anything that's surprising. So,
and that's great. So that is very interesting perspective, kind of from the seller's side, right? Now let's look at the process from the buyer's perspective. And Grant, could you give us examples of challenges that you've experienced as a buyer, and kind of things like red flags that you were always raise your antenna and kind of make you pause and maybe think about whether or not you want to proceed?
Yes, a lot of things can kill deals. The most common ones have to do with a combination of trust and the purported state of the business. So from our perspective, we feel if I was an entrepreneur, I would assume an investor is going to do their due diligence and just be honest about the condition of the business. That helps both of you get to the answer as fast as you can. And if there is a problem, you don't waste all your time, you can move on. So, in the process with Gracie was extraordinarily transparent, gave us, a lot of access to understanding raw data systems, et cetera, which gave us a lot of confidence that there was nothing being hidden. Once you develop that trust, it just enables you to move through the process much faster. So I would categorize the types of issues into issues that really don't end up being big issues. They're not deal killer issues. Mm-hmm. Things like, we can always deal with messy financials. Or messy data, we can clean it up and understand it ourselves. So that isn't an issue really at all. Deal killers, these are the unfortunate ones. Deal killers that really didn't need to be deal killers. And again, you'll see how this comes back to trust. We recently had a deal where the initial material showed twice as much revenue and a much more diversified revenue stream than we subsequently learned about. That's going to kill the deal because it's about trust. Another one is background checks. We always ask people, we always say, we are going to run a thorough background check. What will we find? And if somebody has something in their past, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and they're honest about it with us, we can sometimes get comfortable with it that it's a historical problem. But if they tell us that we're not going to find anything, and this has happened several times, and then we find it, and their first reaction is, I didn't realize your background check was going to be that thorough, and that's a bad response. That's going to kill a deal because it takes a historic issue and makes it a current integrity issue. Mm-hmm. So those are deal killers that didn't have to be deal killers. And then there are some deal killers that, irrespective of how they're brought up, they're going to be a deal killer. So it's probably best to just identify them up front if you can. Some compliance issues can be deal killers. I mean, we live in healthcare, so we're very comfortable taking compliance risk. But if it's compliance risk where we feel like we're going to be betting the firm, betting the company, that's not compliance risk we're willing to take. Mm-hmm. And then just fundamental business issues, things that compromise what we originally felt about the ability to grow this business and achieve the return that we felt that we could get. Those kinds of things you're not going to get over once you establish them. So again, it's in the interest of everybody to identify those things right off the bat.
That's a great perspective. And it's interesting that trust is really at the center of it. It's kind of this day and age, people sort of forget we're all online, we're all over the place, but that's really fundamentally, this is a deal and this is a relationship going forward, particularly when you have founders and business owners, entrepreneurs coming on board and working with you into the future. So yeah, that's great. Rob, did you want to comment on any, Rob or Chris, maybe you've seen in your experience deal killers or kind of anything else that's relevant to the process of the sale?
Chris, why don't you go from an operations standpoint?
Yeah, I'll take that first. We did run into a deal killer with our second process, and it was actually time. Time does kill deals if the diligence is dragging on and you're continuing to get. We started giving forecast that summer. We were nailing every forecast, and then as we whittled it down, we missed December forecast, and all of a sudden the potential buyer got all nervous. Well, I think I've mentioned to you, they pulled back on the price over 1 month, and our patient owner says, no, I'm not going there. And so, the only reason we held the deal open was there was a strategic that was wanting to be involved. And so we held open the process at the very first end for an extra 6 to 8 weeks. That the strategics are a little slower than private equity. And so the whole process had an extra 8 weeks in there. And if we wouldn't have held that open, we would have actually closed that deal on the 1st of December as we nailed all the forecasts. So time does kill deals. It does give people more opportunity to just continue to diligence. And if somebody's looking for a reason to, maybe they're not ready to check off on the deal, we've ran into that too with some of the buyers at the end. They're looking whether they've hired Bain or McKinsey to say, oh, well, your costs are going up. We actually had a situation where the consultants, I think I'm not going to say which one it was, they said our costs were going to go up 25%, which was totally wrong. And 2 years later, our costs have actually gone down. But time does kill deals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, the only thing I had to add on that, Grant hit and Chris hit on a lot of the fundamental things. But I'd say from a seller's perspective, emotions and commitment, come into play, especially as Chris said, deals drag on, and do their, are they committed to the process and their objectives they laid out in the front, or sometimes you get it's very emotional, especially at the end of a process, and sometimes owners aren't really ready to let the baby go, if you will, and so that emotions can kill deals as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One final thing that also we learned, between the buyer and the seller, there's going to be a lot of accountants and attorneys, and the accountants and attorneys work for the seller and buyer, and they end up irritating both sides. Sometimes you can cut out a lot of time by just picking up the phone and talking to the buyer or seller. You'll find out, oh no, that's not what we meant at all. But yet the consultants will tell you, yeah, that's what they meant. So pick up the phone, and it'll save a lot of heartache and get a lot of frustration out off the table.
Yeah, actually, just to exemplify that point, I think the guideline I've always had as it relates to what to have advisors work through versus what should the deal principals work through is, if it's a material business topic, you really ought to use that as a way to build your relationship with the person you're going to be partnering with, and you're learning a lot about each other as you work through those issues. I've generally found that the people that we end up partnering best with, you're able to often find solutions that weren't the solution that either of the two parties had going into it, but you can just come up with much better solutions when you work together on those key issues, and it makes the process for the advisors run much more smoothly as well. I know with Gracie, we had a rule that we would identify what the big business items were. She and I would work through it, and then we would communicate back to the advisors on where we were on those topics.
Yeah, that's a great point. How do you, what's sort of the best way to communicate, right? If you're communicating only through your advisors, things will get lost in translation. But right. And but you could find the opportunities to build that relationship, to build that trust, and come up probably with a better solution than just kind of parties coming up with a solution on their own. So, wow, we're almost out of time. I had such a, I feel like I want to ask Gracie one more question, and maybe we can just kind of take a little glimpse into what happens after the sale, right? What happens? You get a private equity partner. They kind of give you the kind of the resources. What are the resources that they bring to the table? What has your experience been, Gracie, so far? And can you tell us about that a little bit?
I think one thing we did right and on time is right after the deal closed, we set up a meeting, and Consul came in with my leadership team, and we sat down for 2 days, 2 straight days, and we created the vision, our 3-year vision, what we call the HDD, the High Definition Destination. That was collaborating with Afterburner as well. They really put some names and accountability on where we want to be as a company and how are we going to achieve the milestones that we want. So we basically mapped out through some critical leverage points, and we said by this day, this is how we're going to be looking as a company financially, culturally, clinically. So we aligned ourselves as now at one entity combined with 2 partners that are together in this mission to provide the best quality of care while growing a great company. So to me, that really created not just a higher sense of belonging, but also to my leadership team, they had now their fingerprint on the future, and they committed to achieve the future with us in partnership with Consul Capital. So that was one of the most important things that we did in the beginning of our relationship. And then we went out and we found our who is going to be our chairman and our board. And Consul Capital has the CEO Consul model, where they really place in your board the people that you will need in order to scale. So our board is not made of financial people from the private equity, but from people that really can invest in bringing value so we can scale and build a company together. So it was important that the grant gave me the freedom to even choose the chairman that we have. He suggested me 3 chairmen, and he told me, well, you're going to be the one having the most close relationship with him or her. You should be the one picking. So to me, it was very important that he gave me that flexibility to choose the ideal partner that I thought it would help me the most.
That's great. And it sounds like you got a lot of resources and a lot of kind of know-how from your partner. And we see this play out time and time again. Companies who were maybe this was their, the expected growth rate, and they join forces with a private equity partner, and they just take away, and just seeing that value and the excitement that that creates, and the value to the customers and the employees. I mean, it's really cool to see. And I think I just want to pause and just acknowledge that for a moment, is that the resources that private equity or another partner can bring to the table, it really can be really valuable to the company's future. Well, thank you guys so much. This was wonderful. Really appreciate your insights. And now we can move into a Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.